I had spent months dreaming of our wedding, the flowers, the music, the perfect guest list. Every detail was a reflection of how deeply I loved her. But just 2 weeks before the big day, she looked at me with tears in her eyes and said words I never expected. "I can't stop thinking about someone else. If you truly loved me, you'd let me go." In that moment, my perfect life shattered. I remember the first time I really imagined our wedding. It was an the cliché daydream of white dresses and bouquets. It was a quiet certainty that this life with her was exactly where I belonged. I spent months planning, not obsessively, but meticulously, because she deserved nothing less than perfection. Every detail was a reflection of how deeply I loved her. From the color scheme to the playlist that would carry our first dance. Even the seating arrangements weren't arbitrary. I spent nights crafting a harmony among family, friends, and colleagues, wanting every interaction to feel seamless. We had argued about flowers, of course. She loved peonies, I loved lilies. Eventually, we compromised, choosing a mix that reflected both our tastes. The florist was already impressed with our vision, though she couldn't quite capture the warmth I felt imagining her walking down the aisle toward me. The invitations had been sent weeks earlier, each one hand-signed, each one carrying a note expressing how excited I was to marry the woman who made me feel like home. The music was harder. I wanted something timeless, something that would play not just for us, but for every memory that would follow. We compromised again. Her favorite song for the processional, mine for the recessional. And then there was the guest list. I had agonized over every name, making sure no one felt slighted, that everyone we loved would be there to witness what I assumed would be the happiest day of our lives. It all seemed effortless in those first months, because love, at least the kind we shared, had a way of smoothing over small conflicts. Every discussion about centerpieces or menu choices was filled with laughter and gentle teasing. I would watch her examine a fabric swatch or debate over table settings, and I would think, this is what it's all for. This is life, stitched together with love and attention. Even mundane tasks took on significance. Grocery runs became shared adventures in selecting the perfect ingredients for dinners. We'd eat while discussing our honeymoon plans. I would drive her to work early in the morning just so we could catch the sunrise together. I would record voice notes of little reminders for her. "Don't forget your coffee. Drive carefully. I can't wait to see you tonight." She did the same for me. Little messages that would appear at random moments, making me smile at my phone like a fool in love. I remember the week before the final wedding rehearsal vividly. We had spent hours choosing linens, testing candles, and ensuring the lighting matched our vision. I was exhausted but exhilarated, imagining her there, looking radiant. The culmination of every dream I had carefully nurtured for months. I even practiced my vows alone in the living room, adjusting the cadence, emphasizing words like forever, cherish, always. In my mind, there was no shadow, no pause, no what if. I could feel the weight of love solidifying into something eternal. Then, 2 weeks before the wedding, everything shattered. It started like any ordinary evening. I came home from work, carrying a bouquet of lilies because I knew she liked to have fresh flowers around the house. She was sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone, her face partially illuminated by the screen. I expected a smile, a kiss, maybe a teasing comment about my choice of flowers. Instead, I found her staring blankly, her lips pressed together as if holding back a storm. "I can't stop thinking about someone else," she said, finally breaking the silence. Her voice was soft, almost fragile, but it carried a weight that made my chest tighten. I froze. My mind couldn't process it immediately. It felt like a betrayal so profound that the world tilted slightly on its axis. Every memory, every shared laugh, every promise we had exchanged flashed in front of me in an instant. I wanted to scream, to beg, to pull her into my arms and convince her this was just a fleeting thought, but deep down, I knew it wasn't. If you truly loved me, you'd let me go, she added, tears glistening in her eyes. Trembling on the brink of falling, I couldn't speak. Words stuck in my throat like stones. The room was heavy with silence, punctuated only by her quiet sobs. I could see her love for me, the remnants of it, fighting its way through the guilt and confusion. But it wasn't enough. I sank into the couch next to her, numb, unable to articulate what I felt. Anger, heartbreak, disbelief, and sorrow all collided inside me like waves crashing against jagged rocks. My entire reality, the wedding, the plans, the future we had meticulously carved crumbled in an instant. I tried to reason with myself. Maybe it's temporary, maybe she's stressed, maybe she's scared. But my intuition, honed by countless intimate conversations and shared moments, whispered a cruel truth. This wasn't temporary, and it wasn't about fear. It was about her heart straying despite everything we had built together. I thought about the invitations we had sent, the hotel reservations, the floral deposits, the DJ, the dress fittings. Hundreds of tiny threads, each one a manifestation of my love, now dangling precariously over an abyss I hadn't anticipated. I felt dizzy with the sudden realization that all of this, the perfection, the dreams, the plans, was built on an illusion, one that could vanish in a single confession. We sat in silence for what felt like hours. Her tears fell, mine did not dead. I was still processing, trying to understand how the person I trusted most in the world could feel this way. How love could be so fragile, so mercilessly vulnerable. And then I began to question everything. Had I missed signs? Was our love ever real, or was it just a series of carefully constructed moments, illusions of happiness meticulously planned to distract us from underlying cracks? And yet, through all the turmoil, I realized something profound. Love isn't always about possession or certainty. Sometimes it's about the courage to face the truth, even when it destroys the world you thought you knew. I had to decide, hold on and risk suffocating both of us, or let go and allow her to follow her heart, however painful that might be. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying our life together in my mind, weighing every memory against this shocking revelation. I could feel the wedding slipping further from my grasp with every tick of the clock. I could imagine walking down the aisle alone, or worse, watching her with someone else in the near future, and it made my stomach churn. And yet, in that gut-wrenching silence, a strange clarity emerged. I understood that love, at its purest, isn't about holding someone hostage to your desires. It's about acknowledging their freedom, their choices, even when those choices are agonizingly painful. I didn't have the words that night to tell her everything I felt. I only knew that I had to prepare myself for what would come next, the confrontation, the decision, the heartbreak that would inevitably follow. The dream wedding, the perfect illusion, was over before it began, leaving only a stark, unrelenting truth. Love could be beautiful, but it could also break you in ways you never imagined. The next morning, I woke up to the pale sunlight streaming through our bedroom window. casting a soft glow over the chaos of my thoughts. I wanted to convince myself it was a dream, that when I blinked, she would be smiling at me, apologizing, and saying it was just a fleeting moment of confusion. But the room was silent, heavy with the residue of the previous night's revelation. She was there, sitting on the edge of the bed, staring at her hands. I could see the struggle in her posture, the way her shoulders tensed and relaxed, as if she were preparing herself for a fight she didn't want to fight. "I don't want to hurt you," she said quietly, almost whispering, though the words hit me harder than any shout ever could. Her eyes, usually so warm and inviting, were distant, reflecting a storm I couldn't calm. But I can't keep pretending. I care about him, and I can't ignore it anymore. I tried to steady my voice, to summon the courage to speak before my emotions overpowered me. "How long?" I asked simply. No accusations, no dramatics. Just a single word loaded with years of shared history and trust. "Months," she admitted, her voice cracking. I thought I could suppress it. I really did. But it's not fair to you or to me to pretend anymore. I felt my chest tighten, the breath catching in my throat. Every memory, every moment of intimacy, every secret shared in the quiet of our nights suddenly seemed fragile, as if it could shatter with the slightest touch. I wanted to argue, to bargain, to plead, but deep inside, I knew words would not bridge the chasm that had formed between us. We spent the day in tense silence, punctuated by fragmented conversations that never quite reached resolution. I watched her move around the apartment, every gesture reminding me of the countless times we had shared laughter, meals, and late-night talks. And yet, each gesture now carried a pang of betrayal. The familiarity that had once comforted me felt like a knife twisting in my chest. I tried to focus on rational thought, on understanding her perspective. I reminded myself that emotions are messy, unpredictable, and beyond anyone's control. But the heartache was physical, a weight pressing down on my ribs, making it hard to breathe, hard to think. Every plan, every dream, every hope for the future seemed to evaporate into thin air, leaving behind only the stark reality of loss. We argued not shouting, but with the intensity of suppressed grief. I asked questions I didn't expect answers to. Did you ever love me like you love him? Were all our memories just nothing? How could you let this happen now, when everything was supposed to be perfect? She responded with tears, explanations, and admissions of guilt. But nothing could soothe the raw wound that had opened in my chest. I realized something in that moment. Betrayal isn't just about the other person's actions, it's about the dissonance between what you believed and what actually exists. The life I had meticulously crafted with her, the vision of love and partnership, was no longer aligned with reality. And the hardest truth of all, I couldn't fix it. I walked alone through the streets that evening, the city lights blurring as tears welled up in my eyes. Every couple I passed, every hand held, every laugh shared between strangers felt like a reminder of the life I was losing. The wedding we had dreamed of, the culmination of months of planning and anticipation, was slipping away, not because of circumstance, but because the person I loved had changed her heart. And yet, amidst the heartbreak, I found a strange sense of clarity. I began to understand that love isn't about possession or control. It's about acceptance. Acceptance of joy and pain, of loyalty and betrayal, of connection and inevitable separation. I could cling to her, fight desperately to reclaim what I had thought was ours. But I knew it would only deepen the wound. For both of us. When I returned home, we sat together on the couch, the silence between us heavy but necessary. I held her hand briefly, a gesture of acknowledgement, not reconciliation. "I can't stop loving you," I admitted, voice trembling. "But I also can't stop you from being who you are, or from following your heart, even if it's away from me." Her eyes widened, a mixture of relief and sorrow washing over her face. You're letting me go," she whispered, disbelief coloring her tone. "Yes," I said simply, "because love isn't about chains or guarantees. It's about respect, even when it hurts. And sometimes, the most loving thing we can do is let go." The days that followed were a blur of phone calls, meetings, and cancellations. I called the venue, explained the situation, and received sympathetic nods and apologies from vendors who had grown to know our story. Each call, each cancellation, each adjustment to what should have been the happiest moment of my life added another layer to the grief. Friends reached out, some offering advice, some simply listening. Their words helped, but only slightly. There is no substitute for the absence of someone you loved and trusted, especially when that absence is self-imposed. I spent nights staring at the ceiling, replaying moments in my mind, wondering if there was anything I could have done differently, any clue I had missed. But slowly, painfully, I realized that the answer was always the same: no. Some hearts shift on their own, and no amount of planning, pleading, or devotion can alter that course. And yet, even in the darkest hours, there were glimmers of understanding. I began to see that my love for her wasn't diminished by her choice. If anything, it became more profound, more selfless, because I had chosen to honor her autonomy, even at the cost of my own happiness. I was learning, in the harshest way possible, that love is not about victory or possession, it's about empathy, compassion, and sometimes unbearable sacrifice. We parted that evening with a quiet hug, the kind that carries the weight of everything left unsaid. I watched her walk away, and as she disappeared into the night, I felt the first real pang of freedom mixed with sorrow. The wedding would never happen, the plans would dissolve, and yet, a part of me felt a strange peace. I knew the road ahead would be lonely, that nights would be long and mornings would be harder without her presence. But I also knew I had made the right choice. Love, I realized, isn't always about being together. Sometimes it's about walking away with integrity intact, even when the heart feels like it's breaking in two. The days after our parting were surreal, a mixture of numbness, reflection, and reluctant acceptance. The apartment felt empty, even though her presence lingered in the smallest details, the lingering scent of her perfume, the half-filled coffee mug she had left on the counter, the neatly folded blanket she always placed at the foot of the bed. Every corner of the space reminded me of her, yet the reminders didn't wound as sharply as they did in the beginning. Slowly, they became lessons in resilience, markers of a love that had been real, even if it no longer had a place in my present. I threw myself into work, into routines, into anything that could distract me from the hollow ache in my chest. At first, it was mechanical, an attempt to outrun the grief. But over time, I realized I was also searching for meaning, for understanding, for a way to reconcile my heartbreak with the reality I had to accept. Every meeting, every project, every interaction became a meditation on life, on love, and on the fragility of human attachment. Friends and family offered support in ways that were both comforting and painful. They reminded me that I deserved love, that my heart was capable of healing. But every well-meaning comment carried the unspoken weight: "You lost her." I wanted to argue, to insist that love wasn't lost, only redirected that our connection, though altered, was a testament to the depth of what we had shared. But I knew even then that some truths can only be felt in solitude. I started taking long walks in the evenings, letting the cityscape guide my thoughts. The neon lights, the distant sounds of traffic, the laughter spilling from cafes Olivet reminded me that life continued, indifferent to personal tragedies. And yet, in that continuity, I found solace. I realized that the universe didn't conspire against me. It simply existed, and I had to find a way to exist within it again, independently of someone else's choices. I remembered the wedding we had meticulously planned, now cancelled. The deposits, the invitations, the flowers all gone, but the memories remained. And I began to understand something fundamental. Love is not measured by ceremonies or grand gestures. It is measured by the depth of connection, the honesty of intentions, and the courage to confront painful truths, even when the outcomes are devastating. In moments of quiet reflection, I pictured her with someone else, the very thought twisting my gut, yet strangely softening over time. I had to confront jealousy, insecurity, and anger, not to suppress them, but to understand their place in my emotional landscape. They were natural, human responses, and acknowledging them was part of the healing process. I began to see that love isn't diminished by the choices of others. It is transformed, reshaped, and sometimes refined through suffering. I kept a journal during this period, writing letters I never intended to send. I poured out the anguish of loss, the confusion of betrayal, and the bittersweet clarity that had started to emerge. The words became a mirror, reflecting not only pain but also growth. I wrote about the moments of tenderness we had shared, the laughter, the quiet nights, the stolen glances, and the words exchanged in soft whispers. I honored the love that existed while acknowledging its end. Weeks turned into months. The sharp edges of heartbreak softened into a dull ache, a constant companion that reminded me I had loved fully and sincerely. I started reconnecting with old friends, rediscovering hobbies I had neglected, and exploring parts of myself that had been overshadowed by our relationship. The process was slow, sometimes excruciating, but necessary. In rebuilding my life, I discovered strength I hadn't realized I possessed, a resilience forged in the fire of emotional upheaval. One evening, months after our separation, I visited a quiet park where we had once picnicked together. The bench we had favored was empty, the air crisp, and the sun casting long shadows across the grass. I sat there, closing my eyes, letting memories wash over me without resisting them. I remembered her laughter, her voice, the way her hand felt in mine, and for the first time, I felt not sorrow, but gratitude. Gratitude for having loved, for having been loved, for having the courage to let go when it was the right thing to do. I understood then that dignity is not the absence of pain, but the willingness to face it with integrity. My heart was broken, yes, but it was also wide open, capable of new connections, new joys, and new depths of empathy. Love, I realized, is not always about possession, about weddings, or about forever. It is about understanding, about honoring choices, about bearing witness to someone's truth even when it contradicts your own desires. And sometimes, the most profound act of love is to step aside, to allow the person you cherish to follow their own path, even if that path leads away from you. I walked away from our shared plans, our shared dreams, but not from the lessons she had taught me. I carried forward the understanding that love is complex, beautiful, and sometimes devastating. I knew that one day I would love again, not as a replacement, not as a compensation, but as someone transformed by the depth of my previous experiences. And in that transformation, I found a kind of peace. A peace born from courage, honesty, and the knowledge that I had loved fully, deeply, and selflessly. The wedding may have been cancelled, the plans may have crumbled, but the essence of what we had shared endured within me. I had walked away with my dignity intact, a heart that, though scarred, had learned the true meaning of love, that it is not about possession, but about freedom, respect, and the courage to honor both yourself and the person you cherish, even when it hurts more than words can express.